January 17, 1943. The North Atlantic is a steel-gray expanse, waves lashing like whips against the hulls of a slow-moving convoy. Cold wind bites through woolen coats. Sailors huddle against the deck, faces drawn and eyes scanning the horizon. The smell of salt and oil hangs in the air, mingling with the faint metallic tampes of nervous anticipation. Among the monotony of cargo ships and freighters, USS escorts glide silently, their hulls cutting through the dark waters with an unspoken promise: protection, but not invincibility. Somewhere beneath, German U-boats glide through the icy depths, sleek and silent predators, their periscopes just breaching the surface, eyes fixed on this slow-moving American prize. Conversations are whispers. A young seaman checks his watch, counting the hours since the convoy left Halifax. He knows the stories, wolf packs that devour the unprepared, captains who underestimate these slow Americans at their own peril. And yet, for now, there is a fragile calm. The sea swells and crashes. A distant silhouette of a U-boat breaks the horizon. The game of cat and mouse is about to begin. Every moment is a test of nerves, of strategy, of survival, and no one will leave unchanged. By 1942, the North Atlantic had become a lethal chessboard. German U-boats, operating in coordinated hunted the vital supply lines connecting North America to Britain. Every convoy carried not just goods and ammunition, but the fragile lifeblood of the Allied war effort. The German Navy's strategy was brutally simple: sink more tonnage than the Allies could replace, and Britain would starve, its war machine grinding to a halt. The Americans were still relatively new to the transatlantic convoy system. After the U.S. entered the war in December 1941, they were thrown into the frigid Atlantic alongside the Royal Navy, escorting merchant ships through waters teeming with danger. Initially, there was skepticism among both German commanders and Allied veterans alike. American convoys were often slower, their crews inexperienced, and their tactics untested against the cunning of seasoned U-boat captains. To the Germans, these slow Americans seemed almost easy prey. Life aboard the convoy was a constant strain. Sailors endured freezing nights, the decks slicked with frost. Each crash of a wave against the hull a reminder of the Atlantic's indifference. Watch rotations were grueling, often 12 hours long, punctuated by the distant, low hum of engines and the occasional haunting foghorn. Fear was constant. A glance toward the horizon could reveal the telltale periscope of a lurking U, or nothing at all, which was just as terrifying. Every crew member understood that silence could mean death, and movement could attract it. The Wolfpack strategy employed by the Germans relied on communication and timing. A single submarine might shadow a convoy for days, transmitting positions back to command via radio. Then, as night fell, the U-boats would converge, striking simultaneously from multiple directions. Merchant ships, lumbering and poorly armed, were particularly vulnerable to such coordinated attacks. Escorts tried to compensate, but early American commanders were still learning the precise balance between defense and aggression. The stakes were more than tactical, they were existential. Every ship sunk represented tons of supplies lost, and every sailor lost represented a growing hole in the Allied manpower. Yet the Americans brought a resilience that the Germans often underestimated. Despite the cold, despite fatigue, and despite a constant sense of vulnerability, crews adapted quickly. Engineers kept the engines running under extreme conditions. Gunners manned their stations with growing confidence, and officers refined convoy formations to minimize exposure. These measures, small and incremental, would soon prove crucial in turning what seemed a predictable massacre into a test of endurance, strategy, and human resolve. Intelligence played a quiet but pivotal role. While early in the war the Allies had limited insight into U-boat movements, by late 1942 the breaking of German codes and improved radar allowed convoy commanders to anticipate attacks with increasing accuracy. This subtle edge did not eliminate the danger, but it offered a glimmer of hope, the knowledge that preparation could tip the balance. Even in the unforgiving expanse of the Atlantic, across the ocean, German U-boat captains monitored their own logs with confidence. They were professionals, often decorated veterans, accustomed to hunting and striking with deadly precision. To them, American convoys low, lumbering, and inexperienced, almost preordained victims. Yet even the most experienced commander could not account for the unforeseen human ingenuity, technological adaptation, and the sheer determination of crews pushed to their limits. What they mistook for weakness would soon be revealed as resilience, and what they assumed would be a simple hunt would become a battle that tested the very limits of submarine warfare. The stage was set. The Atlantic was vast, dark, and indifferent, a crucible where strategy, courage, and chance collided. On one side, American sailors, learning fast under immense pressure. On the other, German U-boat captains, confident in their tactics and technology. Between them, a convoy that would not only test the skill of men but would challenge assumptions about speed, vulnerability, and the underestimated might of the American Navy. The battle for the Atlantic was as much a contest of technology as of courage. On the Allied side, advancements in sonar and radar slowly turned the tide against the once dominant U-boat. Sonar, or SDEC, as the British called it, allowed escort vessels to detect submerged submarines, while radar gave them a fighting chance to spot periscopes breaking the surface at night or in poor visibility. High-frequency direction finding HFDF allowed convoys to intercept U-boat radio transmissions, offering glimpses of enemy intentions before an attack could be executed. Each new development added layers of complexity to the battle, forcing German commanders to rethink long-practiced tactics. The U-boats themselves were formidable adversaries, Type 7 and Type 9 submarines. The backbone of the Kriegsmarine combined speed, stealth, and torpedo firepower. Skilled crews could shadow convoys for days, coordinating attacks in wolf packs that struck with deadly precision. German commanders relied on meticulous planning, aggressive patrolling, and calculated surprise. To them, American convoys low, lumbering, and inexperienced seemed almost preordained victims. Yet even the best submariners faced unpredictable variables. Rough seas, evasive maneuvers, and the ever-present chance of Allied intelligence intercepting their positions. American escorts were still evolving. At first, their strategies were reactive, relying on trial and error to anticipate submarine attacks. Early losses spurred innovation. Zigzagging formations, layered defensive screens, and coordinated depth-charge barrages. Crew training intensified as sailors learned to read sonar pings, interpret radar blips, and maintain constant vigilance under freezing, exhausting conditions. While still inexperienced compared to battle-hardened British veterans, the Americans brought a raw determination that would soon become their hallmark. The human element remained central to this contest. U-boat captains were driven by a mixture of duty, pride, and professional ego. Many had earned medals for previous successes. Their confidence reinforced by early triumphs in the Atlantic, they underestimated American convoys, mocking the slower ships and presuming easy victories. Meanwhile, on the deck of each freighter, sailors grappled with isolation, fear, and the relentless monotony of the sea. These human pressures on boat seeders would shape every decision, from tactical maneuvers to moments of sheer survival instinct. By early 1943, subtle shifts in the balance of power were emerging. Allied code-breaking efforts, particularly the decryption of Enigma messages, gave convoy commanders critical insight into U-boat positions and planned attacks. The cumulative effect of technology, strategy, and human resilience meant that no convoy would be entirely predictable. The Atlantic, once a theater of near-absolute German dominance, had become a crucible of uncertainty, where misjudgments could be fatal, and the underestimated could strike back with deadly efficiency. Within this tense, icy expanse, the stage for a clash was set. The slow American convoy, mocked by German captains as easy prey, carried not just cargo, but the potential to prove that meticulous planning, relentless vigilance, and unwavering resolve could turn a seemingly vulnerable target into a lethal trap. This was not a mere battle of ships and submarines, it was a confrontation of philosophies, of confidence versus caution, and of human endurance against mechanical precision. And as the convoy pushed onward, slicing through waves and fog, neither side fully understood the consequences awaiting them. Every movement mattered, every decision carried weight, and the Atlantic's vast darkness concealed both danger and opportunity. For the sailors aboard the American convoy, every day was a test of endurance. The North Atlantic in January was merciless. Decks were slick with ice, wind cut through layers of clothing, and visibility often dropped to a matter of meters in heavy fog. Men huddled in the lee of the ship's superstructure, clutching steaming mugs of coffee, yet the warmth never reached their fingers or their fear. The constant hum of engines and creaking of the hull served as a reminder that beneath the surface, danger waited silently. The psychological toll was profound. Sleep came in fragmented bursts, punctuated by the jarring clang of a bell or a shouted order. Sailors learned to live in a state of perpetual alert, eyes scanning the horizon for a fleeting periscope or the flash of a torpedo's wake. Anxiety was compounded by the knowledge that mistakes could mean death, not just for themselves, but for their entire convoy. Yet within this crucible, camaraderie flourished. Small gestures, a shared ration, a hand on a shoulder, a whispered joke became vital anchors of humanity. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the act of pressing forward despite it. The convoy's tactical formation was a delicate dance of survival. Merchant vessels, slow and unwieldy, relied on layered escort screens to detect and repel submarine attacks. Ships were arranged in staggered lines, zigzagging to disrupt torpedo targeting. Escorts, destroyers, corvettes, and frigates patrolled the perimeter, their sonar and radar scanning the deep and surface for the slightest hint of danger. Wolfpacks, however, were cunning. German commanders coordinated attacks to strike simultaneously from multiple directions, hoping to overwhelm defenses. They counted on the convoy's slow speed to give them time to position and fire with precision. Yet even within this perilous scenario, American tactics evolved. Escorts learned to anticipate ambush points, to communicate silently through signals and prearranged codes, and to launch depth charge patterns with careful calculation. Technology was both a shield and a weapon. Sonar allowed escorts to detect submerged submarines, translating faint echoes from the depths into actionable intelligence. Radar revealed periscopes and the silhouettes of approaching U-boats, even in pitch-black darkness. HFDF systems intercepted enemy radio signals, providing a predictive edge that was previously unimaginable. Every advancement chipped away at the seeming invincibility of the German U-boats themselves were marvels of engineering. Type 7 submarines could travel long distances underwater, move with startling silence, and deliver devastating torpedo attacks. Crews could execute complex maneuvers, coordinate attacks through encrypted radio transmissions, and exploit gaps in convoy defenses. German commanders trusted in their technology, confident that it would carry them to success. Yet the clash of technologies produced unpredictable outcomes. Depth charges could drive a submarine to crush under pressure, while a well-timed radar signal allowed an escort to strike preemptively. The interplay between sonar pings and silent maneuvers created a tense cut-and-mouse game, where every device, every reading, and every calculation mattered. The technology alone did not guarantee victory, but in the hands of disciplined crews, it transformed vulnerability into lethal potential. The commanders of the convoy faced immense responsibility. On the bridge, the captain's eyes never left the horizon, scanning for the slightest disturbance in the water or the faintest hint of smoke from a distant funnel. Decisions had to be instantaneous, yet carefully considered. Every order had consequences measured in lives, cargo, and mission success. Leadership extended beyond strategy. It was about morale. Officers maintained calm voices over the roar of the sea, conveyed confidence through posture and tone, and inspired trust among men whose nerves were fraying under constant threat. They balanced strict adherence to convoy protocols with the flexibility to adapt to unpredictable circumstances. The ability to read both the sea and the human condition became as important as reading the instruments on the bridge. Across the Atlantic, German U-boat captains exuded confidence. Many had grown accustomed to the hunting grounds near Iceland and the western approaches to Britain, where convoys were once easy prey. The slow American convoy was initially dismissed with barely concealed amusement. veteran commanders saw predictable patterns: lumbering cargo ships, inexperienced crews, and gaps in escort coverage. Wolfpacks would coordinate, strike swiftly, and vanish before counterattack. Yet this confidence was done. Overestimation of their own abilities, combined with underestimation of American resilience, created vulnerabilities. The Germans relied heavily on rigid doctrine: shadow, report, strike. They assumed the Atlantic's chaos could be tamed through training and discipline. But the human element proved unpredictable. Convoy crews improvised, adapted, and learned at a pace that confounded even seasoned captains beneath the tactical and technological. Maneuvers lay a deeper ethical dimension. The convoy system was a life-and-death struggle where decisions carried moral weight. Every torpedo fired, every depth charge dropped, represented a choice that affected hundreds of lives. Sailors grappled with this reality constantly, aware that survival often demanded ruthless precision. For the Americans, the question was survival under fire. And for the Germans, the calculus was destruction, tempered by strategic necessity. Yet both sides faced the same human truths: fear, responsibility, and the weight of conscience. Courage and morality intertwined. Even small acts rescuing survivors, providing medical aid, sparing a disabled vessel defined the human dimension of warfare. The convergence of these angles: human, tactical, technological, leadership, enemy, and moral creates a tapestry in which every choice, every maneuver, every burst of gunfire carries consequences. The slow American convoy, once underestimated, now emerges as a multi-dimensional force, its strength measured not only in steel and firepower, but in courage, intelligence, and adaptability. The stage is set for the decisive confrontation where all these elements collide, and the Atlantic will determine who survives, who perishes, and who is remembered. February 1943. Convoy HX-229 cut through the North Atlantic like a scar across dark water. By nightfall, visibility collapsed. Snow squalls swept across the formation, blotting out stars and horizon alike. For the escorts, this darkness was both shield and curse. It hid the convoy from easy sight, but it also concealed the predators closing in beneath the waves. At 2:47 hours, a periscope rose briefly through the swell. A German Type 7 U-boat, its hull rocking under the pressure of winter seas, adjusted its firing angle. The commander had tracked this convoy for hours. To him, the Americans were predictable, slow, cautious, vulnerable. He ordered the tubes flooded. Moments later, the first torpedo struck. The explosion tore through the hull of a merchant vessel near the convoy's center. Steel buckled. Flames leaped skyward. Men were thrown from their bunks as alarms screamed into the night. Within seconds, the convoy snapped into motion. Escorts surged forward. Signal lamps flashed. Engines strained as ships altered course in disciplined zigzags drilled into muscle memory. Sonar operators leaned over their instruments, headphones pressed tight, listening for echoes in the chaos. A faint contact appeared 10 by 7. Depth charges rolled from stern racks, detonating in violent succession. Columns of water erupted, hammering the sea into white fury. Below the surface, the U-boat shook violently. Lights flickered, instruments rattled. The commander ordered a sharp dive, ballast tanks flooding as the hull groaned under pressure. He had expected confusion. Instead, he found coordination. More submarines converged. From the flanks, Wolfpack elements attempted to penetrate the escort screen. Torpedoes streaked through the water, leaving pale wakes visible even in darkness. One struck a freighter on the outer column. Another passed beneath a zigzagging hull, missing by meters. Above, American gunners fired into blackness, guided by radar returns and instinct. Tracers arced across the night. The convoy, battered but unbroken, continued forward, each ship holding position, each escort tightening the defensive ring. The Atlantic echoed with explosions, steel, and human voices raised against the wind. This was no longer a hunt. It was a fight, and the outcome was no longer certain. By dawn, February 17th, the sea revealed the damage. Smoke drifted low across the waves. One freighter burned fiercely, abandoned to the Atlantic. Others steamed on, scarred but alive. The convoy had taken losses, but it still moved as one. For the U-boats, the night had failed to deliver decisive results. Coordination had broken down under relentless counterattack. Several submarines reported damage. Others had expended torpedoes without success. The escorts had learned to anticipate surface attacks, forcing U-boats deeper, robbing them of speed and initiative. Mid-morning brought the turning point. A Type 7 attempted to surface for air and bearings. Radar caught it instantly. An escort destroyer accelerated hard, closing the distance in minutes. Depth charges detonated in a tight pattern. The submarine vanished beneath the surface and never reappeared. Nearby, another U-boat took severe damage from near. Forced to disengage, Idlimped Hawaii, its commander, shaken by how quickly the Americans had reacted. This was no longer the Atlantic of 1941. The balance had shifted. Inside the convoy, exhaustion set in. Men had been awake for nearly 24 hours. Hands were numb. Faces were streaked with oil and smoke, yet discipline held. Damaged ships were stabilized. Crews transferred where necessary. Escorts rotated stations without breaking formation. By early afternoon, the Wolfpack withdrew. The convoy, slower now, pressed on toward port. It had not emerged unscathed, but it had survived a coordinated submarine assault that only months earlier would have annihilated it. The Germans had underestimated what training, technology, and resolve could accomplish together. The Atlantic had delivered its verdict. As the convoy reached safer waters, the full cost became clear. Ships lost, cargo destroyed, men missing, presumed swallowed by freezing seas. Survivors spoke quietly, voices low, eyes distant. Victory felt heavy, not triumphant, yet strategically, the implications were unmistakable. Reports filed by Allied commanders highlighted critical successes: effective escort coordination, disciplined convoy spacing, radar-assisted detection, and aggressive depth-charge tactics. These were no longer experimental methods. They were proven doctrine. German after-action reports told a different story. U-boat commanders noted increasing difficulty penetrating convoy defenses. Radar detection during surface attacks had become lethal. Depth charges were more accurate. American escorts were no longer hesitant, they were proactive. The psychological shift mattered as much as the physical losses. U-boat crews, once confident to the point of arrogance, now approached convoys with caution. Aggression gave way to survival calculations. For American sailors, the experience forged something enduring. They had faced the Wolfpack and held. Across the Atlantic, naval planners took notice. Battles like this one contributed to a growing trend. By mid-1943, U-boat losses rising, Allied shipping losses falling. The tide was turning not through one decisive battle, but through cumulative adaptation. Numbers told the story clearly. Convoys defended with layered escorts and intelligence support were surviving at rates unimaginable a year earlier. German submarines were being sunk faster than they could be replaced. Experienced crews were lost. Training pipelines strained. Most importantly, the myth of the helpless convoy died here. American naval forces, once mocked for inexperience and slowness, had proven they could learn, adapt, and endure. The Atlantic was no longer a hunting ground, it was contested space. And for the men who sailed those convoys, the lesson was carved into memory. Survival was earned minute by minute, decision by decision, in darkness and cold where no mistake went unpunished. The North Atlantic never remembers names. It does not honor courage or mourn the dead. It simply endures. Yet history remembers. The slow American convoy dismissed, mocked, underestimated proved that warfare is not decided by speed alone. It is shaped by discipline, by preparation, and by the quiet determination of ordinary men performing extraordinary tasks under impossible conditions. In these waters, technology mattered. Strategy mattered. But above all, judgment mattered, the ability to adapt faster than the enemy expected. For the U-boat captains who never surfaced again, the Atlantic became a grave shaped by miscalculation. For the sailors who survived, it became a proving ground where fear was mastered and confidence earned. The Battle of the Atlantic did not turn in a single night. But nights like this one bent its course. And when history asks how the tide shifted, how the hunted became how mockery turned to caution, the answer lies here, in steel hulls cutting through black water, moving forward when retreat would have been easier. Slow, perhaps, but never weak.